The sky broke open without warning. It was early morning, and the world was still half asleep when the first red cracks spread across the clouds. People on the streets stopped and stared. They did not understand what they were seeing. It looked like the sky itself was tearing apart, like someone was ripping a giant sheet of paper from the other side. A deep sound rolled across the land, heavy and slow, like the growl of a giant waking up. Across cities, soldiers stepped outside their bases and pointed their weapons upward, even though they knew it was useless. Civilians filmed the strange sight with shaking hands. Some prayed, some ran, some could not move at all. They felt something old and powerful pressing down on them, something that did not belong to Earth. Jack Turner, a young military pilot, stood on the runway of West Ridge Air Command. He felt the ground trembling under his boots. He had trained for war, but not for this. Nothing in his life had prepared him to see the sky split open like a broken egg. His commander shouted orders behind him, but Jack did not hear the words. His eyes stayed fixed on the glowing scar above. Something was coming through the crack. A shape formed inside the light. Wings, long and wide, scales that shone like molten metal, a long neck and a head with sharp horns. It was a creature from the oldest stories, from the myths that humans never believed could be real. But now one hovered in front of them, flying out of the sky as if it owned the world. A dragon. More dragons followed behind the first. Dozens. Hundreds. They came in tight formation, moving with discipline and purpose. Their wings beat with slow, mighty strokes, each one sending shockwaves through the air. Jack felt his chest tighten. These were not wild beasts. These were soldiers. Reports from other countries arrived fast. Dragons were appearing everywhere, dropping out of the red cracks over every continent. Their massive shapes darkened the skies above cities, deserts, oceans, forests. Humanity watched in silent fear as they filled the world like a living storm. A voice echoed from the sky, loud enough to shake the buildings below. It came from the largest dragon, the one with black scales and gold eyes that glowed like fire in the dark. His wings stretched wider than a passenger jet. He hovered above Earth like a king on a throne. He spoke in a deep, ancient language. At first no one understood him. The sound felt like thunder rolling across stone. Then a translation began to appear on every screen on Earth. It came through satellites, radios, and even devices that were turned off. The translation crawled across the screens like glowing letters. We are the Drakkar. We are older than your mountains. We are stronger than your storms. We claim this world now. Kneel and you may live. Jack felt his heart hammering in his chest. All around him, soldiers waited for orders. Some shook with fear. Others tried to hide it. But no one moved. The Dragon King continued. He lowered his head slightly, like a judge preparing a sentence. You have until the burning sun touches the horizon. When night falls, those who do not kneel will be destroyed. The sky shifted again. More cracks opened, surrounding Earth in rings of red light. It looked like the planet was trapped inside a giant claw. The dragons spread across the sky, forming a perfect formation. Their shadows fell over land and sea. In the White House, leaders and generals watched the broadcast. In Europe, Asia, Africa, and across the islands of the Pacific, presidents and prime ministers stared in disbelief. The threat was clear. The dragons had not come to talk. They had come to rule. Jack's commander finally spoke. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed fear. Get ready. We hold position. No one fires until the order is given. Jack nodded. His hands shook slightly, but he forced them to stay steady. He looked at the sky again. The dragons were forming a wall of wings and fire. They believed humanity would kneel. They believed humanity would break. But on the far side of the base, in a small, hidden bunker, a group of engineers and officers stood in front of an old steel door. It had no labels, no signs, only a fingerprint lock and a small red light that had stayed dark for years. Now the light turned green. Inside the bunker, machines began to hum. Screens lit up. Data poured across the monitors. One of the engineers whispered to the others. It's time. We start phase 1. Back on the runway, Jack felt a strange calm settling over him. The dragons were waiting. The world was holding its breath. The sky burned. The dragons roared. But Earth did not kneel. A quiet message moved through the secret bunker, sent across a long-hidden network. Operation Sentinel is now active. Jack did not know what that meant. Not yet, but he felt something shift in the air, something human and unbroken. The dragons thought they had already won. They were wrong. The dragons did not wait long after the warning. When the sun climbed higher in the sky, the first wave of draconic soldiers broke away from the great formation above. They moved with perfect discipline, diving toward Earth like falling stars. Their wings cut through the air with deep, heavy sounds that made windows shake. People below could only watch, frozen between fear and disbelief. Jack Turner stood beside his fighter jet, helmet in hand, staring upward. The landing squad was coming straight toward his base. They were huge, larger than any aircraft he had ever seen. Their scales glowed like hot iron, and the fire inside their throats lit their necks like lanterns. Jack felt small, like a child looking at a storm that could swallow the sky. The first dragon hit the ground with a force that cracked the runway. Concrete split under its claws. Smoke and dust blew out in a wide ring. Soldiers shielded their faces as the beast lifted its head and roared. It was a terrible sound, filled with power and hunger. The dragon began to speak in the same ancient language from the warning, but this time the meaning needed no translation. It was claiming the ground beneath it. Jack's commander shouted, "Hold positions! Do not fire unless fired upon." But the dragons did not wait. Flames burst from their jaws, sweeping across the base in long, bright arcs. Fire rolled over vehicles and buildings. Heat slammed into the soldiers like a wall. Jack felt it on his skin even from a distance. The dragons were not here to scare them. They were here to crush them. Despite the danger, the human soldiers fought. They fired rifles and launched rockets, though they knew these weapons would hardly matter. Bullets bounced off scales. Rockets exploded harmlessly. The dragons laughed, the sound deep and cruel. They believed the humans were weak prey fighting a hopeless battle. But then something unexpected happened. A dragon landed near a squad of soldiers and swept its tail across the ground. 3 men were thrown into a concrete barrier. Jack expected them to stay down, broken and helpless. Instead, they pushed themselves back to their feet, blood on their faces, and charged again. The dragon blinked in confusion. Humans were not supposed to do that. Another dragon slashed at a group of defenders, knocking them aside like toys. But once again, the wounded soldiers crawled, limped, or forced themselves upright. Their bodies shook, but they refused to stop. Their weapons were weak, yet they kept firing. They moved with stubborn, impossible will. The dragons hesitated. Their attacks slowed. Their proud expressions twisted with something new, uncertainty. "They should be dead," one dragon hissed in its own tongue. "They do not fall," answered another. Jack watched the scene with wide eyes. He saw a soldier on the ground, bleeding from a deep cut, smiling as he aimed his rifle again. "Round 2, the soldier muttered. That short, quiet line made something tighten in Jack's chest. It made him want to fight even against impossible odds. The dragons roared in anger and confusion. They blasted more fire across the base, trying to break human spirit. But the soldiers simply spread out, took cover, regrouped, and pushed back again. For every man who fell, 2 more stepped forward. Jack finally received orders to launch. He sprinted toward his jet, climbed in, and powered the engine. The ground shook as another dragon landed nearby, but he did not stop. He took off into the smoke-filled air. From above, the base looked like a battlefield from another world. Fire, smoke, shadows of wings. Dragons moved through the chaos like living mountains. Humans fought like ants refusing to be crushed. Jack banked hard to avoid a dragon passing close to him. Its eyes glowed with sharp intelligence. It swiped at his jet with one massive claw, forcing him to dive. He fired his missiles, but they exploded harmlessly against its scales. Still, the burst of smoke blinded the creature, giving Jack room to escape. Down below, the dragons were becoming frustrated. They had come to show strength. Instead, they found themselves struggling to control a single human base. One dragon captain landed near his troops. "These creatures fight beyond reason," he growled. "Why do they keep rising? Where is their fear?" No one answered. High above Earth, on the command ship, the Dragon King Vaker watched the battle through glowing screens. His golden eyes narrowed with irritation. His landing squad was supposed to terrify humanity into surrender. Instead, the humans were resisting with strange, stubborn energy. A sensor officer approached him. "My king," he said carefully, "there is something else. We are detecting sudden activity across the planet. Human energy spikes, unusual signals, hundreds of them, all at once." Vaker turned his head slowly. "Explain." "We do not know the source," the officer replied, "but the humans are activating something." Vaker stared at the glowing data on the screen. Lines of human signals spread across the continents like veins of light. "Impossible," he whispered. On Earth, Jack returned to low altitude, scanning the burning base. Below him, soldiers continued fighting with desperate strength. The dragons above circled in growing confusion. Then every radio, every screen, every device on the base flickered. A new signal appeared. A calm mechanical voice spoke from the comm system. "Global activation confirmed. Phase 2 preparing." Jack froze. "What does that mean?" he whispered. Before anyone could answer, the ground outside the base began to shake again. Deeper this time, like something huge was waking up beneath the earth. The dragons looked down, alarmed. Something was happening. Something the dragons had not expected. Something humanity had kept hidden. And whatever it was about to rise. All across the world, hidden systems began to wake up. Deep underground, behind sealed doors and forgotten tunnels, old machines came to life with low humming sounds. Lights flickered on for the first time in years. Screens that had been dark now glowed with maps, data, and strange symbols. Humanity had been preparing something in secret, something the dragons had never guessed. Jack Turner had landed his fighter jet on a damaged strip of runway. Smoke still rose from the burning buildings. Soldiers carried wounded men to safety, but every radio around them repeated the same message in a calm voice. "Global activation confirmed. Defense network awakening." Jack listened with a mix of confusion and hope. He had never heard of any network like this. Most soldiers around him looked just as lost. If this was a human weapon, why had no one spoken of it? Why had it been kept so quiet? The ground shook again, stronger than before. Jack felt the vibration through his boots. He turned toward the far edge of the base, where a stretch of land had always been fenced off. Everyone thought it was just a storage area, maybe an old bunker. Now the dirt rose like a swelling wave. Soldiers backed away as the ground split down the middle. Dust shot upward. A long metal shape pushed out from the earth. Slowly at first, then with more force. It looked like the top of a huge platform, covered in metal plates and thick armor. Steam burst from vents along its sides. Jack took a step forward. "What is that?" No one answered. They were all staring. A giant metal tower lifted into the air, rising higher and higher. It locked into position with a heavy clang. Blue lights activated across its surface in long, glowing lines. Then other towers began to rise one after another. Some were small, others huge, stretching toward the sky like steel giants. A voice echoed from hidden speakers. "Sentinel grid online. Calibration complete." The dragons above the base circled in confusion. They roared at the new structures, unsure whether to attack or retreat. Their keen eyes scanned the machines, but they did not understand what they were seeing. On the Dragon King's command ship, alarms began to beep. Vaker leaned forward as his officers struggled to read the incoming data. "My king," one of them said, "the humans have activated a planetary defense system. We are detecting thousands of nodes. Their function is unknown." "Unknown," Vaker growled. "How is that possible?" Humans are primitive. The officer swallowed hard. These structures are not primitive. They are beyond our records. We see energy signatures that do not match human technology. Baker's wings twitched. He did not like surprises. On Earth, the new towers moved. Panels opened, revealing rails lined with bright kinetic rods. They hummed as if charging. The air became heavy around them. Jack watched in awe. The ground-based machines aimed themselves at the sky, their tops shifting smoothly like giant weapons coming to life. A soldier near him whispered, "This isn't normal tech. This is something else." The machines locked into place. Then the first shot fired. A bright streak cut through the sky like a bolt of lightning. It struck a dragon in mid-flight. The beast roared as the impact shattered several of its scales. It twisted in the air, struggling to stay balanced. Everyone on the base froze. Human weapons had never been able to do that. The dragons in the air panicked for a moment. They scattered, twisting and diving to avoid the next shot. But the towers adjusted instantly, tracking them with perfect accuracy. Another shot fired. This time, a dragon crashed into the ground outside the base, sliding through dirt and debris. Tried to get up but collapsed again. His wing was broken. Jack felt a wave of shock wash over him. We had this all along? But he knew that could not be true. No one in the military had ever seen anything like this. This was not common knowledge. This was not in any plan or training. Someone had built this in secret. Someone had prepared for a moment like this. The sentinel grid fired again and again, creating bright blue arcs across the sky. Dragons roared in pain and confusion as the strikes forced them to retreat higher. On the command ship, Vaker stood very still. "They built this," he said slowly. "Humans built this, without us noticing." One of his advisors shook his head. "My king, this level of work requires centuries. Humans do not live that long." Vaker narrowed his eyes. He knew what that meant. Humans had built these systems not in one lifetime, but through many, working in secret, passing knowledge forward. They had prepared for war long before the dragons arrived. Back on Earth, more towers rose. Screens inside underground bunkers lit up. Across continents, the sentinel grid formed a glowing map, each node joining the next like a giant web. Jack watched the formation with a tight feeling in his chest. Humans had been pretending to be weak, but now their hidden strength was rising into the light. The dragons roared again, louder and angrier. They were no longer confident. They were confused. And for the first time, a small seed of fear began to grow in their ancient hearts. The dragons had always believed they were the strongest beings in the sky. Their scales were harder than steel. Their fire could melt stone. Their wings carried them above storms and mountains. But now, as the sentinel grid fired again and again, their confidence began to shake. Jack Turner stood near the ruins of a hangar, watching the sky. The dragons circled above, moving in uneven patterns. They were not flying with the smooth grace they had shown before. Instead, they twisted and jerked away from the glowing blue shots that tracked them with perfect accuracy. One dragon screamed as another kinetic blast hit its wing. The creature spiraled downward, slamming into a forest beyond the base. Smoke rose from the trees. Even from a distance, Jack could hear the pained roar. He had never imagined dragons could sound afraid. A soldier near him whispered, "They're not unstoppable. They can be hurt." Jack nodded slowly, but he also felt a strange heaviness in his chest. If humanity had hidden this kind of power, what else were they hiding? How deep did these secrets go? High in the sky, the largest dragon of the landing squad tried to regain control. He roared commands to his troops in a language Jack could not understand. The smaller dragons formed a loose defensive ring around him. But their movements were shaky. Their wings trembled. The sentinel grid fired again. The leader barely dodged the blast. The bright streak scraped across his side, cutting a long line through his scales. The dragon froze in mid-air. His eyes widened. He looked at the damage, real damage, done by a single shot. Fear flickered inside him. On the command ship above the clouds, the Dragon King Vaker watched everything. His golden eyes narrowed as he saw his landing squad struggle. "They are reacting poorly," one officer said. Vaker's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "No, they are reacting honestly." He leaned closer to the screen. "They feel something they have not felt in centuries." "Fear?" the officer asked quietly. Vaker did not answer. He did not need to. On Earth, the dragons made one last attempt to regain control of the battlefield. 3 of them dove together, fire bursting from their jaws. Flames washed across the sentinel towers, but the towers did not burn. Their armor glowed, then cooled again. The dragons pulled upward, confused. Jack watched the scene with wide eyes. "They don't understand our machines," he said aloud. A nearby engineer shook his head. "It's not just the machines. It's us. They don't understand humans at all." The dragons regrouped in the sky, but the formation was shaky. They no longer moved with pride. They moved with caution. Their heads jerked left and right, watching the towers closely. The sentinel grid fired once more. A dragon shrieked as the blast tore through one of its wings. It lost control and crashed into the ground, sliding across dirt and rock. Its claws dug into the earth as it struggled to rise. Jack approached slowly, weapon raised but hands shaking. The dragon was enormous up close. Its scales glowed faintly, and its eyes burned with anger and something else. Confusion. The dragon stared at Jack. Its voice was deep and tired. You fight like prey that learned the hunter's ways." Jack swallowed hard. "We fight to live." The dragon growled softly, almost like a breath. "Your kind was supposed to kneel." Jack shook his head. "We don't kneel that easily." The wounded dragon tried to stand again, but its legs gave out. The strength was fading. For a brief moment, Jack saw not a monster, but a creature that suddenly realized humanity was not what it expected. Above them, the dragons withdrew higher into the sky, trying to escape the reach of the sentinel grid. On the command ship, Vaker stood tall, wings folded tight. The room around him was silent. His landing squad had failed, not because they were weak, but because the humans were different, far different from what the old legends had described. "My king," the sensor officer said softly, "we have intercepted a message from the humans. It is addressed to you." Vaker turned. "Play it." A human voice filled the command chamber, speaking calmly, in flawless dragon language. "We know who you are. We know why you came. You think we are weak. You think we are simple. You think we do not understand you." The dragons in the room shifted uncomfortably. The voice continued. "But we have been watching you for a long time, Dragon King, and we are ready." Vaker's eyes widened. He had never considered that humans could learn the secret tongue of his people. That language was ancient and guarded. The message ended with one final line. "This world is not yours." For a moment, the entire command ship was silent. Then Vaker lifted his head slowly. He felt something he had not felt in hundreds of years. Uncertainty. Far below, Jack Turner watched the retreating dragons. The giants of the sky were no longer fearless. Humanity had shown them something new, something they did not expect. For the first time in their long lives, the dragons felt fear. The war grew larger as both humans and dragons pushed forward. On the ground, in the sky, and even in the old ruins across the valley, small battles happened again and again. The Dragon King sent more warriors, believing that victory was close. But humans worked quietly and fast, building new defenses and making strange machines that dragons did not understand. Every day, humans acted calm on the outside, but inside they prepared for something big. The tension between both sides felt heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Jack moved with a team through a destroyed town near the mountains. The roofs were broken, and the buildings were black from dragon fire. His team carried simple tools, not big weapons, and this made the dragons watching from far above think the humans were weak. But the team was not there to fight. They were setting up small devices in the ground. These devices looked harmless, like small metal stones. The dragons did not know the real purpose of them. In the sky, the Rose watched with calm eyes. He was one of the older dragons and trusted by the Dragon King. He believed humans were foolish for trying to stand against ancient power. He thought their movements were slow, their tools weak, and their planning simple. From above, he could not see the hidden lines connecting each device. He only saw people walking in straight lines and placing things in the dirt. To him, it looked like a desperate attempt to act strong. Back at the base, Commander Rourke studied the map. The lines humans had drawn were thin, but each one had a purpose. He spoke quietly to his officers, giving clear instructions, never raising his voice. Everyone listened because they trusted him. He reminded them that dragons were strong, but strength could be used against itself. The plan required patience. Humans had to look predictable. They had to look small. They had to look like easy prey. Meanwhile, the Dragon King grew more confident. Reports from scouts told him humans kept falling back. Villages were empty, roads were quiet, and not many soldiers were seen on the fields. This made him smile in pride. He believed the humans were slowly breaking apart. He thought the fear he seeded in them was now spreading everywhere. But he did not know what the humans were hiding behind the silence. Jack's team returned to camp late in the night. Everyone was tired, covered in dust and ash. The machines they planted were ready, and now the next phase would start. As Jack sat under a broken tower, he looked at the stars. He knew dragons loved the sky. To them, the sky was their home, their throne. But he also knew something they did not. The sky was about to become a trap. He hoped the plan would work before more lives were lost. The Rose flew across the valley again the next morning. He expected to find humans running or hiding. Instead, he saw them standing still, almost waiting. This confused him. Humans were supposed to panic when they saw dragons. But these ones did not move. They looked calm, almost too calm. The Rose circled lower, wanting a better view. He did not notice the small blinking lights underneath the ground. The Dragon King gave the order for the full attack. Hundreds of dragons rose into the sky, their wings shaking the air. Their roars echoed across mountains and riverbeds. They believed this attack would end the war once and for all. They believed the humans had no more tricks left. The ground below trembled as shadows of wings moved across the land. When the dragons reached the center of the valley, everything went quiet for a moment. The humans did not run. They did not scream. They simply watched. This silence made some dragons uneasy, but they pushed forward because the Dragon King commanded it. The air grew thick with heat as dragons prepared to release their fire. Then the ground flashed. A bright line of light rose between the dragons and the humans. Then another, and another. In seconds, a giant grid of glowing lines formed in the sky. The dragons tried to fly higher, but the lines moved with them. They tried to fly lower, but the lines followed. The trap had activated. The Rose felt something he had not felt in years, fear. The lines hummed, shook, and then released a strange pulse. His wings felt heavy. His breath turned short. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. He looked down at the humans. They were still standing still waiting. Jack whispered softly, "Start phase 2. The machines underground began to rise. They unfolded like metal flowers and pointed toward the sky. No flames came out, no explosions, only deep vibrations. Dragons felt their wings responding in strange ways they could not control. The old laws of flight stopped working. The Dragon King roared in rage, but even he felt the pull. The trap held him in place. For the first time, he understood that humans had prepared this moment from the very start. The valley filled with noise as the grid tightened. And then, just as the dragons prepared to fight back, everything in the sky suddenly went dark. The sky stayed dark and silent for several long seconds. Dragons hung in the air, stuck inside the glowing grid that had trapped their wings. The darkness felt heavy, almost solid, and even the strongest dragons felt unsure. Humans on the ground stood still, watching and waiting. No one spoke. Everyone felt that something important was about to begin. Jack stepped forward, looking up at the massive shapes frozen in the air. He felt tired, but he also felt ready. This moment was why they built the devices, why they spent nights planning, testing, and failing until they finally found something that could hold dragons in place. The machines hummed beneath the earth, stronger now, brighter now. The silence broke when the grid flickered like a heartbeat. Commander Rourke walked to the front line. He held a small control device in his hand, but he did not press anything yet. He wanted to be sure the timing was right. His face was calm, but inside he felt the weight of every eye watching him. His officers trusted him. The soldiers trusted him. And now, even the dragons were forced to react to him. The old power balance was changing. High above, the Dragon King struggled. He pushed his wings, tried to break the grid, and roared in anger. But the grid only tightened more. He ordered the dragons to break free, but their wings no longer obeyed their commands. Ancient muscles trembled without control. Old instincts worked against them, and that made the Dragon King furious. The Rose tried to understand the strange force trapping them. He felt the air shifting around his wings, like invisible hands gripping them. It was not magic. Dragons understood magic well. But this was something else. Something new. Something that humans built with their small hands and quiet minds. He looked down again and realized the humans had been preparing for this for a long time. The grid suddenly flashed with a brighter light. The shadows of dragons shook in the sky. Some dragons cried out in fear, a sound that had not been heard for centuries. They were creatures of pride, creatures who believed nothing in the world could stand above them. But now they were floating helplessly, unable to fly, unable to fight. On the ground, the hidden machines finally revealed their true purpose. They began to shift their shape, turning into tall metal towers. The tops of the towers opened, showing glowing rings that spun slowly. The air around them vibrated with a deep sound that made the ground tremble. Humans stepped back, giving space to the machines. Jack looked at Rourke and nodded. It was time. Rourke raised the control device. He pressed a single button. The machines sent a wave of energy into the sky. It was silent, but powerful. Dragons felt the force hit them like a giant invisible wall. Their wings stiffened. Their chests tightened. Even the Dragon King lost his breath for a moment. The sky felt like a cage closing around them. The Rose struggled to stay calm, but fear crawled into his thoughts. He tried to turn his head, but even that movement felt heavy. Never in his long life had he been trapped like this. Never had dragons been unable to fly. He looked at the Dragon King. For the first time, he saw worry in the king's eyes. The Dragon King roared again, but this time the sound cracked. It did not sound powerful. It did not sound proud. It sounded scared. Below, humans watched quietly. They did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They knew the fight was not over. This was only the moment when dragons realized the truth. Humans were not weak. Humans were not prey. Humans were something else. The metal towers began to glow stronger. The grid in the sky turned solid white, shining like lightning frozen in place. Dragons understood now that something bigger was coming. Something they could not stop. Jack whispered, "This is Phase 3. He did not say it loudly, but every soldier near him heard the weight in his voice. The sky grid started to fold inward. Slowly at first, then faster. Dragons were pushed together, caught in the center of a collapsing cage of light. Their wings clashed, their roars mixed, and panic spread through the air. The Dragon King opened his mouth to breathe fire, but nothing came out. He froze in shock. The machines had shut down Dragonfire. Humans had built something that touched the very core of dragon power. The Rose stared down at the humans, and in that moment, he finally understood why the Dragon King had wanted war. He had sensed it. Humanity was still changing, still growing, still becoming something the dragons could not predict. The sky grid cracked with light, and everything turned white. The dragons hung in the sky, trapped by the humans' power. Their wings beat frantically, but the white light of the grid kept them in place. The Dragon King struggled, but every movement only made the energy around him pulse stronger. He roared, but the sound was swallowed by the energy field. Pride and fear mixed inside him. He realized that the humans were no longer simple prey. They were clever, strong, and terrifying in ways he had never imagined. Jack Turner moved among the soldiers on the ground, checking each machine and watching the sky. He felt nervous but also certain. The humans had prepared every step of this war. They had predicted dragon movements, planned defenses, and built machines that could control the very air dragons flew in. Now, in the center of the battle, the humans held the advantage. Commander Rourke gave the signal. It was time for the final confrontation. Soldiers spread out to cover the full perimeter, activating secondary machines that enhanced the grid's energy. The dragons above twisted and screamed, trying to break free, but every movement was met with resistance. They had been so sure of victory, so sure that fear would flow through the humans. Now the situation was reversed. The Rose turned his eyes toward the Dragon King. "My king," he said, "they are not like us. They were always weak in the ways we expected, but now they show a strength we cannot touch." Vaker growled low. "They have trained, waited, and built for centuries. This is beyond what we imagined. The truth is clear. Humanity is not afraid. They are terrifying." The dragons tried to coordinate, but chaos spread among them. The grid interfered with their movement, their fire, and even their sense of dominance. The Dragon King tried to form a strategy, but each idea collapsed under the weight of human preparation. The humans had anticipated everything, and even now, they stayed calm and focused. Jack took a deep breath. The machines on the ground were fully operational, and the energy pulsing into the sky made the dragon's flight almost impossible. He looked up at the Dragon King and whispered, "It's time to end this." Rourke nodded to him. The humans activated the final wave of the Sentinel grid. Light shot upward like a spear, piercing the clouds. The energy formed a dome over the dragons, preventing them from leaving, preventing their fire from reaching the ground, and keeping them in one place. The Dragon King thrashed, but it was useless. Every dragon below him could see the strength of humans now, their discipline, their tactics, and their terrifying planning. In the distance, humans had set up observation points. Scientists and soldiers monitored every pulse, every vibration, every movement of the dragons. They were ready to react if the dragons tried anything. For the first time, the dragons realized the humans could adapt faster than they could predict. The Rose looked down at the humans, a mixture of respect and fear growing in his heart. "We underestimated them," he said quietly. "They are more than prey. They are masters of strategy, patience, and execution." The Dragon King bellowed, a sound filled with ancient power and frustration. "This is impossible. We are the strongest creatures to ever exist. We will not fall." Jack looked at the Dragon King and met his gaze. The two of them, one human, one dragon, locked eyes across the battlefield. For a moment time seemed to pause. Then Jack spoke, loud enough for the Dragon King to hear. "We are not your prey. We never were." The Dragon King froze. A realization came over him. Humans had not only prepared weapons and machines, they had prepared their minds. Their courage, their intelligence, and their stubbornness were the true power that had trapped him and his army. And now the humans held the ultimate advantage. The sky shook as the Sentinel grid's energy pulsed stronger. The dragons screamed, battered by the invisible force. Their fire was useless. Their strength, their pride, their experience, all of it could not overcome the human strategy that had been centuries in the making. Jack felt a surge of emotion. Fear, yes, but also pride. Humanity had been seen as weak for too long, but now they were showing what they had truly become. The final confrontation was not just about machines or fire. It was about will, intelligence, and courage. The Dragon King looked around at his remaining forces. Chaos spread among them, fear growing. The humans had won this moment. The dragons had been humbled by creatures they thought would always fear them. The stage was set for the last act. The humans were ready to finish the fight. The dragons realized, too late, that they had misjudged the most dangerous opponent in the universe. Not the weakest, but the one that had been patiently waiting for the right moment. The sun rose over the battlefield, cutting through the last smoke and shadows. The dragons hung in the sky, trapped in the Sentinel grid, unable to move freely. Their roars echoed across the valleys, but they no longer sounded like the terrifying creatures of old. They were creatures learning fear for the first time. Jack Turner stood at the front line, watching the dragons struggle. He felt a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Humanity had faced impossible odds, yet here they were, standing together, calm, ready, and victorious in spirit even before the battle fully ended. Soldiers around him checked machines, replenished energy cells, and prepared for any final surprises. They had been tested and they had passed. The Dragon King, Vaker, glared down at the humans from above. His golden eyes burned with anger, frustration, and an unusual feeling, respect. He could not believe that creatures so small, so fragile compared to dragons, had orchestrated this. He realized his assumptions about humans had been wrong. They were not weak. They were terrifyingly intelligent, resilient, and unyielding. "Release them," Jack whispered to the control team. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but filled with authority. The humans did not need to gloat. They had won. Now it was time to finish the fight without unnecessary cruelty. The control team nodded and deactivated the Sentinel grid slowly, allowing the dragons to feel the freedom of movement again. One by one, the dragons rose, battered but alive. Their wings flapped weakly, their pride shattered but still burning within. The Dragon King looked at Jack, a long and unreadable gaze passing between them. Jack met it without fear. "We are not your prey," he said firmly. "We never were." For the first time in centuries, Vaker understood fear. But he also understood something else, respect. Humans had been underestimated for too long, and now they had proven that patience, courage, and intelligence could defeat even the mightiest dragons. The lesson was written not in fire or claws, but in strategy, preparation, and will. The dragons withdrew from the battlefield, leaving behind scorched valleys, shattered ruins, and one undeniable truth. Humanity was not to be feared in body alone, but in mind and spirit. They were cunning, strong, and united, a force that even dragons could not easily conquer. Jack watched them disappear into the sky, feeling the weight of the moment. The humans cheered quietly, not loudly, not with arrogance, but with the relief of survival and triumph. They had given the Dragon King and his warriors something they had never expected: fear. Commander Rourke approached Jack. "They'll remember this," he said. "Every dragon will, and will be ready if they return." Jack nodded. "We'll always be ready. That's what makes us human." High above, the Dragon King looked back once more. His pride remained, but the fear lingered, a lesson carved into the history of dragons. For all their strength, all their age, they had met a species that would not kneel, that would not yield. And in that truth they had been humbled. As the humans gathered and the sky cleared, the world felt quiet for the first time in months. The war had been brutal, but humanity had proven something far greater than firepower or strength. It had proven that courage, intelligence, and unity could challenge even the ancient kings of the sky. And somewhere in the distance, Jack smiled faintly. The Dragon King had wanted war, but humanity had given him something more powerful than any weapon: fear, respect, and the knowledge that the future belonged to those who would never back down.